Guys, was that informative or was that informative? Wasn't it good? There was so much juicy material there. Oh, yes. Thank you so much, Sue. Thank you so much. I'll stop eating and start doing a little bit more work now. I'll tell you a couple of things that I felt in response. The first was we're going to get a testimony in just a minute about a breakthrough. It'll have to be quite quick so that we'll probably not land quite at 1 o'clock, Vince. It'll probably be maybe just after 10 past. But the first was some of us here are physical mothers, and some of us here have been very good physical mothers when we weren't well mothered, when there were loads of gaps. And God just wants to applaud the miracle. Yeah, that we have given, not what we received. And I just felt God wanted to give a really big clap to that. Some of us have been able to mother in a way that we weren't mothered. And some of us are doing that all the time just in our relationships. We're nurturing people and caring for people with consistency, even though it wasn't necessarily our lot in life. Particularly wanted to draw attention to, is it Zara? Sarah, sorry, Sarah. I just want to think, oh my goodness, I don't know Sophie well, but I know she won't be perfect. But isn't she a great example? Come on, if I were you, Sarah, I'd be feeling so smug right here. I think, look at my work. Look at what I brought along. Here's one I prepared earlier. Oh, come on. Hey? Yeah. It's so true. Yeah. But she's a living testimony, isn't she? So well done, both of you. While I'm thinking about it, we are going to be able to cover Sophie's petrol as a ministry. But if any of you want to bless Sophie in other ways, please don't feel manipulated or... No, exactly. She'd be horrified. Look, she's turning a pretty pink. Let's make Sophie turn pink. But if you just wanted to bless her, to bless this next generation, if you feel it on your heart, you can give extra. That would be a real blessing that she's not admitting. But she can go and buy a nice burger and cheese or something. Sorry, why do I always think of food? Whatever she wants to buy with it, she could buy a lovely bunch of flowers with it. Why don't we've got a little testimony here about a breakthrough that's quite recent. So shall we have that, Angie, before I start to do my bit? Right. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about letting God love us, cherish us, and nurture us. You know, the fact that I find this quite hard has been partly explained to me by Sue's wonderful talk. Now, I know some of us had cracking great mothers. Whoa. Sit here and look smug. If we had a cracking great mother, whoa, I had a cracking great mother. But some of us had mothers who were a bit of a mixed bag. And my dear mum, who died last year, she was 96. She'd come to know Jesus, but she was definitely, bless her, a very, very extreme mixed bag. And it really explained to me, Sue, when you were talking, why I find it so hard to actually sit still and let God love me. I might be quite extreme, but I think all of us struggle with it. I think it's common to everyone that will do almost anything rather than just sit there and be loved and receive. For loads of complicated reasons. I suspect with me, people that know me well say I'm definitely undiagnosed ADHD, because as a child, I was just wriggle pants the whole time, couldn't sit still, never mind sit still to be loved, I couldn't sit still to do anything. So that's part of it. But as a Christian now, I just want to serve, I want to give, I want to empower, I want to release, sit still and receive. Oh my goodness, I struggle with that. But it is partly, and it's only partly, I suspect, because of the way I was mothered. I had a very insecure mother who couldn't bear the idea of breastfeeding me because she thought the whole thing was so revolting. And when I determined to breastfeed my own kids, all my family would leave the room because they thought the whole thing was so embarrassing, bless them. So the idea of physical nurture was very alien to her. And she just found it really hard. She just didn't know how to, she just couldn't get there. And she always said, Cleo, where did you come from? When I used to hug her a lot when I was a child, because she was just found it very unusual and just very different from anything that she had known. She did absolutely adore me, but so I always knew I was a loved child. But I was loved because she saw me as very pretty. So I was her idol. She absolutely loved me. But when I became a teenager, she didn't know what to do with the fact that I turned from this pretty petite little ballerina into a giraffe that grew 5 inches in 1 year and got spots. So a pizzeria giraffe, a giraffe pizza. She didn't know what to do with that. So she started, bless her, giving me spot creams all the time, things to help my skin. In fact, she only changed when I got to about 45. She was still giving me stuff for my skin. And then she looked at me and I started getting anti-wrinkle creams. Really, I mean, you know, don't you? Because I gave a lot to, yeah, because I just had more than I could cope with. She suddenly, but it was that, I don't know whether it's a version of the China doll thing. I had to be perfect because I was her trophy. Not in my, I mean, don't get me wrong, she did absolutely love me and endorse me. And she would have said I was such a strong woman and said some lovely things to me. But a lot of it, well, I certainly couldn't mess with her. She was too insecure herself for me to give her any of my load. So everything just had to be perfect. And it was just interesting when Sue used the analogy of the car that cylinders have to be fitted for it to run properly. Hands up if you believe that God can retrofit us with cylinders. He can retrofit today. Yeah? If you've got some cylinders missed, some of your cylinders were great, but life has really got them a bit battered and they're not firing completely as they should do. Yeah, you might have had a fantastic mum and started out in life just fab, but what life has thrown at you has really challenged those cylinders in terms of their performance. God is wanting to retrofit or recalibrate our cylinders. Hey, come on, would blokes be really, really proud of me for that analogy? God is wanting to recalibrate our cylinders today and give us an oil change. How good is that? Can you believe that I'm saying that? Can we just record that, please, for posterity or for something? But please be comforted that in my experience, it is very normal, even for people who say they know about the love of God, to not really find it easy to know the love of God in your knower. You know about it, but to feel it. In fact, I think I've only met one person that was really relaxed about this. And this was a young guy in the Navy. Vince was at sea. I was doing a Bible study on not on a naval base, but through a naval base church. This is about, I don't know, pterodactyls were running around outside. It was a long time ago. We were first married. And there was this sweet little, I think he was a WEM. Now, WEM isn't a sort of strange thing like an Oompa Loompa. It was a type of rank in the Navy. It was meant, he was very junior, he was very young. What, weapons engineer? Oh, I don't know what it would mean, but I think he was a little WEM. And he was in this Bible study group and we were talking about the love of God and everyone was saying how much they struggled with it, except this one darling little guy who was about 18, 17. He said, oh, but I know God loves me. Came from a lovely Christian home. God absolutely adores me. Yes, lovely, lovely, Isabel. Yes, exactly. So that's one of Jesus's disciples was a big mouth. And he became the one that went on and on and on about how much God loves us. That's such a good point. But this guy at a very young age just had it as an instinctive thing that he was adorable. It's just so lovely. Because none of the rest of us knew we were adorable. But he did. And it never had occurred to him that he wasn't. And he looked around with wide eyes. Oh, but I know God loves me because I'm so special, he said. Here I am. And he just had taken it in with his baby food. So what a lovely advert that was. And it shows that it can happen. But for the rest of us, it is all right to have to reclaim some things that don't feel very natural to us. So again, Sue's mentioned a lot of this. But when we look at what God might want to fill the gaps in for, what sort of things are we talking about? Well, we've talked about cherishing. That means making much of us. Are we good at making much of ourselves? Are we good at that? Are we good at thinking, oh, I'm doing all right here. I'll pat myself on the back. Or do we feel that that's a bit unspiritual? Might be a bit proud. Oh dear. Might be a bit conceited. Don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. Yes, that is in scripture, and it's true. We shouldn't be puffed up. But I think there's also a truth in saying we shouldn't think of ourselves more lowly than we ought, that we're no good. That doesn't bring God any glory. You know, it's not, oh Lord, just more of you and less of me, and more of you and less of me, and more of you and less of me. He had less of you before he made you. He made you because he wanted more of you. In fact, he wanted you. And he wanted you to express his glory. Yeah? He wanted it in you form. It's all right. He doesn't want us to diminish into a nothing. He wants to shine out of us. Psalm 27:10. For those of us that are struggling with squirmy pants syndrome like I have and Christian service, or just find it hard just to let that good news sink into places. Psalm 27:10 says, even if my father and mother abandon me, the Lord will, the NLT, New Living Translation, says, hold me close. Other translations say, take me in, gather me in, receive me. And the Lord, he's given me this verse for 20 years. And I think, well, my parents didn't abandon me. They certainly didn't. But perhaps I felt rejected unless I was perfect. You know, does that make sense? It's a bit subtle. But was I really wanted when I was Pizza Giraffe? Was I really wanted? I mean, they would never. Could they cope with the totality and the complications of who a human being really is? Could they cope with me as a Christian when I became a Christian? That was really hard for them. It was enormous. It was challenging. But the point is, whatever our experiences of life, even if those people who are closest to us say they don't want to know or they misunderstand us, the Lord promises he wants to hold us close. If you like, to take us in, to make room for us, deep in that place of protection. And sometimes that is the only protection. Because I don't mean to be funny, but he never promises that Christians will have an easy ride in terms of our circumstances. That isn't on the tin. It's not there in the small print. If somebody sells you a Christianity that says you're just going to get shiny white teeth and a glossy skin and shiny hair and everything's going to be a downhill drag, that's just not what it says. Because his own son got rejected and misunderstood by people. And so we will too. I'm not prophesying it into people, but we show his glory as we go through this life with him, not as we're zoomed up out of it. But very briefly, I'm going to touch on, before my big passage, I'm just going to touch on the bit that Sue mentioned from Matthew 23:37. And this is Jesus himself speaking. He says, you know, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how often have I wanted to gather you together, your children together, as a hen protecting her chicks beneath her wings. So let's just turn to the person next to you and say, Jesus feels clucky about you. Go on, say it. He feels really clucky. These are very maternal images that he's using. Yeah? He's not saying, I want to be a strong fortress for you, Jerusalem. He could have used those images. But what he says, I feel, how often have I felt, I just want to come here. I want to keep you safe in that soft, fluffy place. But then it goes on to say, but you don't want to know, Jerusalem. So Jesus is saying that when he's reaching out to people who are actually rejecting him. But he says what his heart is and what his instinct is, what his desire is for all of us, is to come up into the soft, feathery place where there isn't a lot of responsibility and there isn't a lot of aggro. And in fact, there isn't a lot going on except feeling mother hen's heartbeat. Yeah? And actually, that is the only safe place so often in a time of trouble. It's that soft, feathery place right under the wing. And physically, that is what hens do when life is hard. They stick their chicks under their wings into that safe place where they know they can protect them. God doesn't promise us that he will always be able to protect us from everything in life. But his heart in the place of intimacy is that that's what he wants for us, to get close to him in those times. Now, the part of letting God mother us that I particularly wanted to focus on was God listening, carrying, and caring for our troubles and our anxieties. This is the dimension of mothering that I'm going to zoom in on for the rest of my talk. You see, a perfect mum is able to bear with your troubles because she knows who she is. Many of us didn't have that perfect mum. That's fine. As Sue said earlier, if you ever become a mum, you will know, oh my goodness, I'm just work in progress. And now I've got a baby and I want to be perfect for them, but I'm not. So we forgive our mums. That's not the issue. The deal is letting God deal with the shortfall of what we didn't get. It's not about personally thinking, oh, I would be gorgeous if I'd just been loved a bit more. That's not what we're saying. But the perfect mum can carry your troubles, whether your own mum could or not. And she is able to care for your stuff and be wise about your stuff and give you good advice when you turn to her, and isn't fazed when things are complicated in your life because she knows who she is. And that is how God wants to express himself to us. You know, many of you know we have 3 children. It breaks my heart, but of the 3 of them, I think Caris is the one that finds it hardest to give us her stuff. That's our eldest. She's 29 years old now, and she's disabled, slightly disabled. She went through massive abuse in one of the places where she was living, and she didn't tell us. It came out a year later. I suspect it's because deep down inside, Caris has got the most sensitive disposition and spirit. But I think from very early on, she knew that there was something different about her. She could tell that her mummy was very stressed. And I suspect at some level she blamed herself. And she doesn't want to be a bother. But it was literally, the nurse mentioned it to me when she was in the incubator, when she came out of me. She said, oh, it's as if she doesn't want to be a bother to any of us here in intensive care. She just, it's almost like she's lying on the bed lightly, not to be a burden. And, I'm not blaming myself for that. But from 20 weeks in utero, we knew that the baby had a very slim prognosis for life. That's what the doctors told us. And I do think that little girl knew, oh, help, is it my fault? And we've praised so much over that for her. And we have the most glorious relationship with her. But I do think she is worried about being a burden. And we have to be quite sensitive to that. But I can honestly say that the boys, bless them, and we're so grateful for this, tell us everything. Ooh, more than we expected for them, for young men. They come back with everything. Relationship, finance, professional, academic. They give it to us. All about it. all the time. And it's because they know we can carry it. They're not abashed. They're not protected. They're not trying to prove themselves. They know, oh my goodness, living in London is really hard, really stressful for one of them. Oh, who can I turn to that I can really go, oh, who should I live with? How should I finance it? Oh, tell dad all about it. You know, he feels safe with his parent, not to have to keep his end up. And I mean, it delights me that our younger one who's at university, he happens to be doing something that is quite close to what I studied at university. So we have a common language. So I just love hearing all his issues about his essay about the Picts. Oh my goodness, I said, I never learned about the 6th century Picts. Tell me all about them. And he does. How exciting is that to, just have a common language and a chance to have that. Now, look, I'm not saying we're perfect parents, far from it, far from it. But in terms of God and us, he wants us to be able to tell him all about our essay on the Picts or our equivalent. Yeah? He wants the delight in us coming home from school and saying, somebody stuck their finger up my nose today and I don't know what to do about it. That is actually a delight for a parent. I don't know what to do about this. This happened. This is great. And this happened. Oh, this is really concerning. This happened. So how do we develop this relationship? Now, my central bit, you don't have to turn to it with me, but my central verse for this talk, for what's left of it, is 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 7, which many of us will know, because it's one of those ones that condenses easily in English to a sort of Victorian truism. It says this: cast all your cares upon him because he cares for you. But for many reasons, I'm talking about my own daughter here. I use her as an example. Many of us are abashed or ashamed or embarrassed or concerned or just too stressed to cast our cares upon Jesus. And I'm going to unpick the Greek a little bit with us because it is so powerful. And I'm grateful to a guy called Rick Renner for his translation of the Greek and for some of his interpretations and insights, because they've been really helpful to me. So cast our cares upon him because he cares for you. Right, 2 words first of all. The first one, this is me talking about something completely different. Let's see if this one works. If not, I'll get my own. Oh, yes, a nice pen. That's a lovely pen. Let me get the spelling. Perina. No. No. Right. Darling, can you be my sorter out of this? I don't know whether what you want to do is take it out for a cup of coffee and give it a nice morning, or I just don't want it to keep flapping over. Oh, I see. Oh, good you. Do you know, it was so beautiful that Sue said it doesn't have to be a woman that remothers us. Because I don't know if you noticed, but I went and sat next to Vince and said, thank you so much for remothering me, for being very safe. I can tell him anything, and for being very consistent. It doesn't have to be a husband or a partner, but for people who are able to be consistent in our lives. Such an important look how he's literally here supporting what I do. Okay, so the important thing to say is that although it slips down easily, cast your cares because he cares. So cast your cares noun because he cares verb, yeah? That works in English, but it's not in the Greek. It's quite nice and it's convenient to remember it. Ah. Oh, clever. Are you going to do hot snacks? Come on, are you multifaceted or what? Yeah. Thank you. Marina is the word for cares nouns, yeah? Cast them. And basically it can be translated our anxieties, our worries, our afflictions, our burdens. Okay? So Peter, who was one of Jesus's closest friends, said at the end of his human experience with Jesus and then his church experience moving with Jesus's spirit inside him, setting the world on fire, do you know what I have found about my friend Jesus is that I can cast my anxieties upon him, and I know I can. Wonderful translation. This is something for us women. Our complicated circumstances is another interpretation of this word. You know, there are few people in our lives that we can share our complicated circumstances with. For many of us with friendship, even lovely friends, we have to cut to the chase. But Jesus can take the ins and outs of it, all the contours along the way of the nuances of how we're feeling because of what we've gone through or what we're going through or what's going to go. And what do we do about this? He can take it all. Okay, so that's the cares noun. Because he cares for you is the word M-E-L-E-I. Okay? Melly. 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 And this is a beautiful one. Because it isn't just, you know, in the Victorian saying or the simple glib translation, he cares for you, it can sound like, oh, there, he cares for you. Oh, bless you. Whoever you are and whatever you're doing, I care for you. Yeah? But actually what it means is he pays or gives meticulous attention. It's that sort of care to you. It's particular, and again, it's detailed, the nuances. Yeah? You can give him the ins and outs of it because he cares about every little bit of the nitty-gritty. Yeah? So it's that sort of focused, full, giving himself undivided attention, caring to you, that wants to listen to the whole thing. So you can go, what? And he'll say, and what else? And is there more? Any more? Yeah. He can take the whole thing. He can take the embarrassing bits. He can take the unholy bits. He can take the cross bits, the confused bits, the doubting bits, the angry bits, the let down, disappointed bits, the I don't know what to do about this bits. That is the level of his care. But then the most important word for me, the real game changer, is the word that we have translated in many translations is cast. Okay? Cast your cares. These are our cares. This is his care. But the word for cast is very interested. Epiripto. Epiripto. Okay? Epi just means on. Ripto means this. Hang on to your socks, girls. This is what it means. It means to hurl, to throw violently, or to fling. In secular literature of the time, using the same language, Koine Greek, it is often used for somebody literally dumping on a pack horse their baggage, their belongings, the things that are too heavy for them. Epiripto. So it means to fling, to chuck, if you like, or to dump. It is the only other time it's not used elsewhere in the New Testament at all, except for that story of when in Luke 19, where they fling their coats on the back of the colt that Jesus is to ride into Jerusalem. So it's often used about luggage or stuff. You stick it on, you know, they didn't have a car, but throw it in the boot sort of thing. And it's used for that cult. They eparistoed their coats on its back. And it occurs to me that that really changes things. Jesus is saying, will you let me be your beast of burden? Yes. Not to take the high place, because it occurs to me that quite often we're a bit polite. Oh, Jesus, I'm really sorry to bother you. I know I'm seem a drip, but I'm still worried about this. He actually says, will you let me be your beast of burden? Do you know our central nervous system in the 21st century Western world is not designed to carry what we put on it? 90%, studies show up to 90% of health issues are caused by stress and pressure. Not everything, but up to 90%. The very fact that through our laptops and our phones, some of us are open for business 24/7, we are not designed to carry that weight of all those people's expectations. Eparisto, will you let me shoulder this instead of you? Lovely story about, in fact, this guy that I was reading up the Greek with, Rick Renner. He was trying to build a church in Latvia, as you do. His wife and kids over there at the time. And he was worrying all through the night, every night, because the authorities were quite hostile to church building. And this was going to be like a community center as well. So in order to let it to allow it to happen, they had to, you couldn't get a mortgage for it. And so he knew he had to get the money, but also in order to get the planning permission, you had to have 100% of the money secured. And then it was by a certain date as well. Otherwise, they would have lost all the effort that they'd already made to secure planning permission for this building. So he was sweating and stressing every night. Humanly speaking, come on, guys, as he would be. Because people had already put money in this. He didn't want to lose what people had already emotionally and in other ways invested. They were not going to be able to go ahead if they didn't get it all by a certain time. It felt inhumanly possible. It was just such a high ask, and he felt responsible for it. And he dug into the Greek. And this is what led him to this revelation. Yeah? This is what led him to this revelation. He wants to be our beast of burden. And he learnt to dump it on Jesus. He learnt to dump it on him. You know the end of the story. His sleep patterns changed. It really became real for him. His sleep patterns changed. They got all the money. But before they got all the money, he felt the weight lift off his shoulders because he'd put it onto God. God, you want this church? This is your baby. Will you do the seemingly impossible to me? And I want us, as I close now, to think, to practically think. I think what I'm going to do. How hungry are we? Do we need? Okay, straw poll. 3 people. Do we need to eat now, or can we do a little bit of group work first? Will somebody shout out with a strong and pressing opinion? You want to eat now, or group? Eat now. Right, we're going to eat now then, and then we're going to do our group stuff afterwards. But what I want to leave you with, which will be the first questions for the group. How does Clio's talk, that's me, about dumping your stress onto Jesus, how is it going to change the way you live? Please make a practical plan. Okay? That's going to be your first question. We've got other questions which will lead us into prayer. Sue's also going to share a question with us after lunch. But while you're ruminating through lunch, that's what you can be thinking of. We're talking about casting. We're talking about flinging. We're talking about dumping. We are not talking about politely mentioning that he might want to be bothered, but we don't think he will, and we're so sorry to take up his time. Now, to lead us into this, I'm going to give everyone a piece of paper. And very quickly, if we can have some music up. Can you pass that? I'm going to give half of them to the other side. Fabulous. Thank you. There we go. I've got my, yeah, fabulous. I'm going to get you to write down what is your most pressing burden. If you've got, thank you. If you've got lots, you can write them fast, and lots of them. But I'm going to get you to do it now. Don't think about how you deal with it. That's going to be after lunch. Just write what they are. And I've got this chair here with a big heart, a big soft, squashy pillow heart as a representation of Jesus. I was asking Vince last night, how can I represent the Father to us? And he said, well, I can stand in if you like. But I thought, if I get Vince here, this isn't going to be very good, because what I'm wanting you to do is write it down and you're going to fling it on the chair. And I thought, like, if Vince is standing there all chucking paper at him, that doesn't seem right, really. It's a bit like netball or something. Yeah? But what I'm wanting you to do is to fling it into the heart of God before you start worrying about how you learn to do this as a lifestyle. Yeah? So we've got another 5, haven't we? Yeah? So when you're ready, in whatever way you choose, if you are good at netball at school, you can stand right back there. I'd be delighted. Go right over the chandelier, bang, into the heart of God. If you want to come close and just put it there and have a little word with him, you can do it like that. Just scrunch it up or fold it over. So I promise you, I'll throw them away at the end of it. I won't be looking at them. It's between you and God what your burdens are at the moment. But the impetus, the way we do this, I want to be with a sense of release and dumping and leaving, not with the sense of apology or vulnerability, or I'm really, really sorry to have to mention this, Lord. Cast your cares, cast them onto him, because he is intimately involved and bothered by every detail of what makes you you. So that's my 2 pennyworth, people. Let's do this for real. Let's make this practical. And then we're going to talk in small groups more. Fantastic. Well done, Soph. We're going to talk more about how we unpick this, how we work it out in practice after lunch. Okay? Oh, yeah. And definitely it's not the right place to stand and smile at the moment, is it? Give it a good chuck, girls. Give it a good throw.